Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this committee hearing because this is one of the biggest complaints that I get as I travel my district. A couple of projects I wanted to mention and then ask some questions. First, in my district in Kentucky, southern Kentucky, we have 8 lakes with marinas. Every lake, and that's from 6 hours from east to west in my southern Kentucky congressional district. Each lake is at maximum capacity with their current boat slips. We've had permits, they've had permits, several of the lakes, to build new marinas, to even expand the number of slips they have to increase their capacity. This has to go through the Army Corps of Engineers. The permitting process is a nightmare. We recently announced a new marina opening on Lake Cumberland in eastern Kentucky. It took 12 years for that to get approved. Is there anything that can be done with respect to the Corps of Engineers permitting for infrastructure projects? Can anyone answer that question?
I grew up in Whitesburg, Kentucky, and then moved to Mount Sterling. So I'm one of your.
Yeah. I know where Mount Sterling is.
Yeah, historically a constituent. So I know many of the lakes in question. Ultimately, choices should be politically accountable, including, in my view, choices by the Corps of Engineers. There are laws that they have to comply with that Congress passed, but there needs to be, and there's a rule of reason typically that applies to things like docks and permitting. And if there's too much delay, there ought to be political accountability to the people in the Corps. And what's happened with all the bureaucracy that's grown up, really just over the last 50 years, is that there's no link between the White House or virtually no link in the Corps of Engineers. And one of the reasons to restore clear lines of authority is to actually reconnect those, not to let the White House make the decision about docks and lakes, but if some agency is dragging its feet, to make a decision and then call the question and get it resolved.
Okay. Another very important project that I'm working with Congressman Bucshon on is a new bridge, Interstate 69 between Evansville, Indiana, and Henderson, Kentucky. We've been waiting for a long time on the environmental impact study, and I appreciate the question the Chairman asked about litigation and things like that. This project is #1 priority for both Congressman Bucshon and myself. A very important link between an interstate that goes through Tennessee and basically from Canada to Mexico. Really will open up a rural part of America. And the permit process, you know, every time that we check with the government agencies, they'll blame another agency. They'll say it's delayed. What can Congress do to try to streamline the process? Because if you meet with one of the bureaucrats, they will always say, well, we're doing better than we've ever done. We're, pat themselves on the back, but it still is delayed, and it's a frustration that's holding America back. Not just my district. I don't think my district's unique to anything. What legislatively, or are there any legislative solutions, or is this all an executive branch function to try to streamline the process to get the permitting process? If we have an infrastructure bill next year, a major infrastructure bill like the President wants, I'm concerned that this won't go anywhere near the timeline that Congress hopes. So I guess I'll let anyone answer any questions on advice on how we as Congress or as representatives can encourage the administration to try to streamline the process.
You know, the bureaucrats probably are doing a good job. The problem is there are 12 different agencies that have jurisdiction. And so if there's not a motivated political figure at a very high level forcing it to happen, as happened, I think, in Louisiana, has happened with the Gateway Tunnel process that got expedited, it's happened with the Tappan Zee Bridge in New York. If you don't have that front page political willpower to make that bridge happen, it will get bogged down for, it could be decades. And again, I think there is a legislative solution. You need to reconnect the lines in the hierarchy. We'd be happy to work with your office and talk about what the really quite simple legislative reconnections are that don't involve changing the underlying substantive law.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.